I've looked at the photo of my fifth birthday party 1,000 times, me with a cowboy hat, my dad grilling burgers, my sister crying over a popped balloon. It's a perfect slice of 1980s suburbia, faded to a warm, hazy yellow. But when I scanned it into my computer last night, there was someone new in the picture, a tall, thin man standing by the back fence, and he was looking right at me. It started as a rainy Sunday project. My wife, Amelia, was at her yoga retreat for the weekend, and I was left to my own devices. I'm a sentimental guy, a bit of a hoarder of memories, and our attic is overflowing with boxes of old photos. My kids, both in college now, barely have any physical pictures of themselves. It's all on a cloud somewhere. I wanted to change that for my own history, to digitize the archives, so to speak. Preserve them before they faded to nothing. So I set up my new high-res scanner, brewed a pot of coffee, and pulled down the first box, labeled Childhood in 1981-1989. The first photo I picked was that fifth birthday party. It was always my favorite. You can almost smell the charcoal and freshly cut grass. I placed the 4x6 print on the scanner bed, closed the lid, and ran the software. The machine whirred, a bar of white light creeping across the glass. A few seconds later, the image popped up on my monitor. The colors were instantly more vibrant, the details sharper. I zoomed in on my 5-year-old face, a goofy, gap-toothed grin plastered under the brim of that oversized cowboy hat. I chuckled, remembering how I refused to take it off for a week. Then I panned over to my dad, a younger, healthier version of the man I'd just visited at the nursing home, expertly flipping burgers. That's when my eyes drifted to the background, to the chain link fence separating our yard from the miller's next door. And I saw him. He was standing just behind the swing set, partially obscured by an overgrown lilac bush. He was tall and unnaturally thin, wearing a dark suit that seemed completely out of place for a sunny afternoon barbecue. His face was a pale, blurry oval, but even with a lack of detail, I could feel his gaze. It was fixed, unwavering, aimed directly at the camera, or more specifically at me. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I'd stared at this photo my entire life. I knew every blade of grass, every smiling face. He was never there. My first thought was that it was a glitch. A scanner error. Dust on the lens creating a weird, man-shaped smudge. I quickly cleaned the glass with a microfiber cloth, wiped down the photo itself, and scanned it again. The whirring of the machine sounded ominous this time. The image appeared. He was still there. Identical. Unmoving. My heart started to pound a little faster. I stood up and walked around my office, a nervous energy buzzing under my skin. "This is stupid, George," I muttered to myself. It had to be a technical issue. Maybe the scanner's software was trying to correct the image and was creating an artifact. I'm a detail-oriented guy. I work as an architect. For God's sake, my mind is trained to find logical explanations. But this felt different. I pulled the physical photo out of the scanner and held it under my desk lamp, my hands trembling slightly. I squinted, running my thumb over the glossy surface. There was nothing. Just the familiar scene. Me, Dad, Mom bringing out the cake, my sister mid-wail. No tall man. No dark suit. Just the fence and the lilac bush. I put the photo back on the scanner, my breath held tight in my chest. I scanned it a third time, and a fourth. Every single time, the digital version showed him standing there, a silent, spectral wedding crasher at my birthday party. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the draft in the old house. My rational mind was at war with the evidence on my screen. I saved the file, naming it birthdayanomaly.jpg, and pushed away from the desk. Maybe I just needed a break. I went downstairs, made a sandwich I didn't eat, and stared out the window at the rain. But his image was burned into my mind, the way he just stood there, watching. After an hour of pacing, I couldn't take it anymore. I went back upstairs, my mind racing. What if it wasn't a glitch? The thought was insane, but it took hold. I dug through the box and pulled out another photo. This one was from a family trip to the Grand Canyon. I must have been about 7. The 4 of us are squinting in the bright sun, standing near the edge, a vast, majestic canyon behind us. I've always loved this picture because we all look genuinely happy. I placed it on the scanner, my hand hovering over the scan button. I felt a profound sense of dread, a feeling like I was about to open a door I should leave shut. I clicked it. The light crept across, the whirring sound filling the silent room. The image loaded. My eyes darted around the screen, frantically searching the background. The tourists, the rocks, the sky, nothing. A wave of relief washed over me. I let out a shaky breath, a nervous laugh bubbling in my throat. See? Nothing. Just a weird one-time thing. I was about to close the program when I decided to zoom in, just to be sure. I scanned the crowd of strangers behind us on the viewing platform. And then I saw him. He was further away this time, standing near a tour bus in the parking lot. But it was him. The same tall, slender frame. The same dark, formal suit, even more bizarre in the scorching Arizona heat. The resolution wasn't good enough to see his face clearly, but it was a bit sharper than in the birthday photo. It wasn't just a blur anymore. You could almost make out features. And he was closer. Not physically closer in the scene, but his presence in the photo felt more defined, more intentional. He wasn't looking at the camera this time. He was looking at my family. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat in my office chair, the glow of the monitor painting my face in a pale, sickly light. I had 2 images open side by side to my 5th birthday party and the Grand Canyon. In one, a shadowy figure lurked by a fence. In the other, the same figure stood by a tour bus hundreds of miles and 2 years away. I kept flipping between them, my mind doing frantic, useless gymnastics trying to make sense of it. It was impossible. A man who only existed in the digital ghost of a memory. When Amelia got home the next afternoon, she found me in the same spot, surrounded by stacks of old photo albums. I looked like a madman. I hadn't showered, my hair was a mess, and there were at least 5 empty coffee mugs on my desk. "George, honey, what's going on?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and confusion. She dropped her duffel bag by the door. "Did you even go to bed?" I just pointed at the screen. "Look, you have to look at this." I tried to explain it calmly, methodically. I showed her the original prints, then the scanned versions. I zoomed in on the figure in both photos. She leaned in, squinting at the monitor. "I guess I see a smudge," she said, trying to be helpful. "It's probably just a lens flare or something, honey. Old cameras did weird things." "It's not a smudge, Amelia. It's a person. It's the same person. Look at the suit, the build." She straightened up, crossing her arms. She had that look on her face, the one that said she was trying to be patient with me. "George, they're just blurry shapes. You're overtired. You've been staring at these things for hours. Your eyes are playing tricks on you." "No, they're not," I insisted, my voice rising with a desperation that sounded crazy even to my own ears. He's there, and he's getting closer. That was the line that really worried her. Closer? What are you talking about? They're just old pictures. She put her hand on my shoulder. Come on, let's get you some fresh air. You've been cooped up in here too long. She didn't see it. She couldn't or wouldn't. The conversation was over. To her, I was just a tired, obsessive husband who'd found a new rabbit hole to fall down. Her dismissal was worse than an argument. It was the first time I felt truly alone in this. The next few weeks were tense. I tried to act normal. I went to work, I helped with dinner, I asked Amelia about her day. But my mind was always somewhere else, back in that office, with those digital ghosts. Every night after she went to sleep, I'd creep back to the scanner. It had become my secret obsession, my nightly ritual. I scanned everything. Christmas 1988. There he was, a faint silhouette visible through a frosted window, watching us open presents. A trip to the beach, summer of '89. He was a distant figure on the pier, a black slash against the bright, sunny day. With every photo I scanned from a later date, the result was the same. The figure of the man was there, and with each appearance, he was marginally less blurry, a few symbolic feet closer to our family. He was like a phantom slowly walking toward us through the years, through the captured moments of our lives. The physical photos remained pristine, untouched. They were my control group, my proof that I wasn't completely insane. The man only existed in the transition from analog to digital, a hitchhiker on the information superhighway of my past. The breaking point came with a photo from my 10th birthday. It was taken at a bowling alley. I'm holding up a bowling ball, grinning proudly. In the background, in the chaotic mess of people and flashing lights, he was there. This time, he was standing in the arcade section, not far behind my lane. And this time, his image was terrifyingly clear. It was the first time I could truly see his face. It was long and gaunt, with sunken, dark eyes and a thin-lipped mouth that wasn't smiling, wasn't frowning, just existing. His skin was pale, almost translucent. But the worst part, the detail that made me physically recoil from the screen, was that he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me, 10-year-old George, with an expression of I don't know what to call it. Not malice. Not curiosity. It was an expression of patient observation, like a scientist studying a specimen. He was there, and he was watching me grow up. I called Amelia into the office again. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. Okay, you have to see him this time, I said, my voice cracking. There's no way you can miss him this time. She stood behind me, her arms crossed, her patience worn thin. I zoomed in on his face. Look, Amelia. Look at his eyes. She was quiet for a long time. I could feel her unease growing in the silence of the room. That's creepy, George, she finally admitted. It really looks like a person. But it has to be a coincidence. Maybe one of the other parents at the party. In a full suit. Just standing there like that. And how do you explain the other pictures? I can't, she said, her voice softening. But the alternative is that some ghost has been photobombing you your entire childhood, and it only shows up on a 2025 model scanner. Does that sound sane to you? She had a point. It sounded like the plot of a bad horror movie. But I knew what I was seeing. The fight that followed was the worst we'd ever had. She accused me of being obsessed, of losing my grip on reality. I accused her of not believing me, of not supporting me. She told me I needed to see a therapist. I told her she needed to open her eyes. The chasm between us had become a canyon. She was anchored in the real world, and I was adrift in a sea of corrupted data and impossible memories. That night, after she left to sleep in the guest room, I sat alone in the dark, the man's pale face glowing on the monitor. He was the only one who seemed to understand. He had been there all along, after all. My silent companion, my tormentor. I had one box of photos left, labeled High School 1990-1994. I didn't know if I had the courage to open it. I was terrified of what I'd find, of how much closer he would be. But I was more terrified of not knowing. My hand reached for the box. The high school photos were a descent into madness. Each scan was a fresh wave of dread. A school dance, 1991. He's there, standing amongst the chaperones, his dark suit a stark contrast to the dated tuxedos and puffy dresses. He's closer. A football game, 1992. He's in the bleachers, just a few rows behind my parents. His face is almost perfectly in focus now. His eyes are hollow, and they are locked on me on the field. The feeling of being watched my entire life became a suffocating certainty. My life outside of that office began to crumble. I was making mistakes at work, forgetting meetings, staring into space during presentations. My boss pulled me aside and told me to take some time off. Amelia and I were living like ghosts in the same house, our conversations reduced to tense, one-sentence exchanges. She'd leave articles on the table about stress-induced paranoia and psychological breaks. She wasn't being cruel, she was terrified. She was trying to save the man she married from a sickness she couldn't see. But to me it felt like a betrayal. I did try to prove it to someone else. I invited my old friend Dave over, a tech guy who's always been level-headed. I thought if anyone could see it, it would be him. I walked him through the whole process, my voice a low, urgent murmur. I showed him the prints, then the scans. He squinted at the screen, just like Amelia had. "Man, that's weird," he said, pointing at the bowling alley photo. "You can really see a face there. It's probably just a classic case of pareidolia. You know, the brain seeing patterns that aren't there, like seeing a face in a cloud." "But it's the same pattern in a dozen different photos, Dave. That's not pareidolia, that's a person." "I don't know, George," he said, leaning back and shaking his head. "The other ones are pretty blurry. It's a hell of a story, but maybe Amelia's right. Maybe you should talk to someone. The mind is a powerful thing." He left soon after, and I knew I'd lost him too. The walls were closing in. I was the boy who cried wolf, and the wolf was a digital specter no one else could perceive. My own sanity was now the primary suspect. Was I manufacturing this all in my head? Was my nostalgia-fueled project somehow triggering a latent psychosis? The thought was more terrifying than any ghost. If I was crazy, then I couldn't trust my own mind. My entire past, my very identity felt like it was built on quicksand. I stopped scanning for a week. I tried to be normal. I went for walks. I cooked dinner for Amelia. I told her she was right and that I would book an appointment with a doctor. A fragile peace settled over the house. But it was a lie. The man's face was seared into my brain. I'd see him in crowds, a tall, thin figure in a dark suit, and my heart would seize, only to realize it was just a stranger. He owned me now. The final straw was a box of old VHS tapes I'd forgotten about. We'd bought a converter years ago to digitize our wedding video. An idea, cold and terrible, formed in my mind. Photos were one thing. Static moments. But a video was 24 frozen moments per second. My hands trembled as I hooked up the old VCR to my computer. I chose a tape at random. The label, in my mom's cursive, read George's graduation 1994. I pushed the tape in. The VCR whirred and clicked, a sound from a forgotten age. I hit play and started the capture software. The video quality was terrible. The screen was a mess of static and tracking lines before the image resolved into the high school auditorium. There I was, 19 years old, all awkward angles and a ridiculous mortarboard cap, walking across the stage to get my diploma. I watched myself shake the principal's hand, a moment I barely remembered. Then my dad, the amateur cameraman, panned across the audience to find my mom and sister. The camera swept across rows of smiling, proud parents. And then it stopped. For just a second. It stopped on him. He was sitting in the back row. He was perfectly still, while the rest of the crowd moved, fidgeting and clapping. He was a statue in a sea of motion. He was looking directly at the camera, at my dad, at me. The image was grainy, distorted by the poor quality of the tape, but his face was unmistakable. The same gaunt features. The same dead, patient eyes. He was there. He had been at my graduation. A strangled sob escaped my lips. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't pareidolia. This was real. He was a physical presence in my world, somehow erased from the photographs but captured on this magnetic tape. I frantically scanned through the rest of the footage. He wasn't there again. Just that one, chilling, 2-second shot. It was enough. I had to know. I had to understand what it wanted. Why me? My obsession was no longer about proving I was sane. It was about survival. This thing had been attached to me my whole life, a silent, creeping parasite on my memories. And it was getting closer. The graduation video was the last recorded memory I had from my old family home. The next set of albums started with college, with Amelia, with a new life. An icy realization washed over me. The progression wasn't just about time. It was about proximity. In every photo taken at or near my childhood home, he was there. In photos from vacations or school, he was more distant. But in the final tape from that era, he was closer than ever, an attendee at a major life event. He was closing in on a focal point. I looked around my office, at the life I had built. This house, the one Amelia and I had bought 20 years ago, was just 2 towns over from where I grew up. We'd moved back to be closer to my parents. My heart hammered against my ribs. He wasn't just in my past anymore. He was getting closer to my present. I suddenly had a horrifying thought, a theory that made the blood drain from my face. There was one last roll of film I hadn't developed. It was from a disposable camera I'd used on my last day in my childhood home before leaving for college. I'd found it in the bottom of a box, undeveloped for over 2 decades. I had sent it to a specialty lab last week. They had an option to email you the digital scans the moment they were ready. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was an email. The subject line, "Your scans are ready." My finger hovered over the trackpad, a millimeter from the link. This was it. The last document from my old life. The last bridge between my past and my present. Every instinct screamed at me to delete the email, to throw the computer out the window and run. But I couldn't. I had to know how the story ended. I clicked. A series of thumbnails loaded, 24 images of a house in disarray. Boxes everywhere, furniture covered in sheets. Me grinning like an idiot posing with my pack-up car. A final, blurry shot of the front door as I was leaving. I opened the images one by one, my breathing shallow. He wasn't in the pictures of the living room or the kitchen. He wasn't in the shot of my car. I got to the last photo, the blurry one of the front door. My 19-year-old self had tried to take a final, artistic shot of the home I was leaving behind. The focus was off, the lighting terrible. But the subject was clear enough. The front door was wide open, and standing in the doorway, his hand on the frame as if waving me goodbye, was the man. He wasn't in the background anymore. He wasn't in a crowd. He was front and center. His face was rendered in a clarity that stole the air from my lungs. Every detail was sharp: the deep-set, sorrowful eyes, the lines on his gaunt face, the slightly too long fingers of the hand resting on the doorframe. And his expression, it was one of profound sadness, of longing. It was the face of a man who had been left behind. But the most terrifying detail was what he was wearing. It wasn't just a dark suit. Around his neck I could just make out the faint, unmistakable pattern of a tie I now own. The tie Amelia had bought me for our 15th wedding anniversary. I fell back in my chair, a guttural, animal sound tearing from my throat. It wasn't possible. It was a tie I'd only owned for 5 years. Yet there it was, in a photo from over 2 decades ago, around the neck of a ghost. He wasn't just inserting himself into my past. He was pulling my present back into it. At that moment, the door to my office creaked open. Amelia stood there, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She was holding her phone. "I was worried," she whispered. "I was looking through our shared cloud storage to see if you'd uploaded any more photos. I saw the graduation video." "You saw him?" I asked, my voice a raw whisper. She nodded slowly. "On the tape. He was there." "I didn't believe you, George. I am so sorry." Tears streamed down her face. Seeing the proof, undeniable and in motion, had shattered her rational world. She came and knelt by my chair, wrapping her arms around me. For the first time in weeks, we were on the same side, two frightened people facing an impossible truth. "What is he?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What does he want?" I think I started, my voice shaking as the insane theory solidified in my mind. "I don't think he's a ghost. Not in the traditional sense. He only appears when the past is being observed through a modern lens. A scanner, a digital camera. It's like the technology creates a window, and he's on the other side. And that tie means he's not just in the past. He's connected to me. Now." A new, frantic energy took hold of me. It wasn't just about looking back anymore. It was about looking forward. "The progression," I said, grabbing her hands. "It was always leading to that doorway. To me leaving that house. What if he's not just a memory? What if he's a potential, a warning?" The thought was wild, a leap of logic born from terror, but it felt right. He wasn't haunting my past, he was haunting my future by showing himself in my past. "We need to see," I said, my resolve hardening. "We need to take one more picture." We drove in silence, the night thick and heavy around us. We drove to my childhood home. It looked smaller, sadder than I remembered. The family who bought it from my parents had planted a different tree in the front yard, but the house itself, the bones of it, was the same. The front door was the same. We parked across the street. My heart was a drum against my ribs. "What are you going to do?" Amelia asked, her hand clutching mine. I'm going to create a new memory, I said. Right now. I got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, my phone in my hand. It felt impossibly heavy. I aimed it at the house, my thumb hovering over the button. I wasn't just taking a picture. I was opening a door, sending out an invitation. I was forcing a confrontation. I took the photo. The flash was unnaturally bright in the dark street. I looked down at the screen, my hands shaking so badly the image was a blur. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, tapping the thumbnail to view it. The picture was crisp and clear. The empty porch, the dark windows, the familiar front door. And standing there on the porch right in front of the door was the man. He was no longer a figure in the background. He was the subject. He was looking directly at me through the phone's screen. His face was my face. It was me. An older, withered, and desperately sad version of me. The gaunt features, the hollow eyes, it was my face, but aged by decades of sorrow. He was wearing the same jacket I had on right now. The man who wasn't there was me. The me I would become if I kept looking back, if I let my obsession with the past consume my present. He was a glitch in my own timeline, a ghost of my future self sent back as a warning. I dropped the phone. It clattered on the pavement, the screen shattering. Amelia gasped from the car. The figure on the porch didn't vanish. He just stood there, a sad, silent reflection. He slowly raised a hand, not in a wave, but in a gesture of pleading. Then, as if the light was failing, he began to fade, not into nothingness, but back into the shadows of the porch, until he was gone. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the empty porch. Eventually, Amelia helped me back to the car. We drove home and I deleted every scanned photo, every digitized video. I unplugged the scanner and put it in the attic, burying it under boxes of things I would never look at again. It's been a few months now. The fear has faded to a quiet, lingering unease. Amelia and I are talking again, really talking. We're rebuilding. But sometimes, when I catch my reflection unexpectedly in a dark window or a polished surface, I see him. I see the sadness in my own eyes, the faint lines on my face that could deepen into his gaunt features. It's a constant reminder that the past is never truly gone. It's always there, in the background, watching. And you have to be careful how you look at it, because you might just see a future you never wanted. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.